Okay, hello. This is Friday, May 15th, 2026, and this is the Tea with Jamie podcast. And today, I've done a little bit of prep. I've picked out some stories I want to talk about. I've gone through the websites, and this is going to be a little news review, a few little things, some connected, for us to sort of chew over. I always imagine with these podcasts that because of the length of them, sort of 20 to 30 minutes, you're sort of commuting or you're listening while you're having breakfast or making dinner I just wonder what you're up to right now. Anyway, let's kick off by going to Racing News 365. So this is all to do with the drama of the Alpine stake up for grabs. So the title of the article is Christian Horner and Toto Wolff raising the stakes in latest F1 scrap. This is an article by Ian Parks. And they're at it again, Christian and Toto. This time for part ownership of Alpine. It's a 24% stake. Now, interestingly, the team is now valued in the region of $3 billion, and the stake is worth $750 million. And Christian Horner is coming in with a consortium called Otro Capital, and they're supposedly coming in with all the money, right? $750 million. Now, the current stake is, the 24% stake, that is currently owned by a bunch of celebrities and some other business people. And I forget what it is that they paid and what it is. Obviously, it's now worth this 750, but I think they've done very well. I mentioned it on a previous podcast. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I think they've quadrupled their investment, basically. So whatever that number is, not good at maths. However, after they put this offer in, this Otro Capital, led by Christian Horner, a couple of months later, rumours surfaced that Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff had also began discussing taking over that stake. Now, as part of Mercedes or him individually, because he part owns Mercedes, of course, he's also hugely wealthy himself as a business person. So I don't know exactly what that entity is exactly. However, their offer apparently is very low. Reportedly much less than 750 million. So why would they even bother? Why would they even put a number in? Because they're not going to go for it, right? Well, here's where it gets interesting. As we know, Mercedes now supplies Alpine with their power unit. And they've gone from the back of the grid to, where are they today? Team standings. P5. P5 in the constructors with 23 points. Out of 11. So, not only are they the engine supplier, but they've brought a lot of performance to that team. And according to this article, it's very appealing from the board side that Renault and Mercedes could have potential synergies moving forward. And apparently that's very appealing to them. And Toto Wolff is playing hardball here a little bit, right? Because he's got a lot of influence over this situation. Mercedes, now already an integral part of the Alpine operation by supplying their power unit, how awkward would that be if this Christian Horner Otro Capital consortium were chosen over him, and yet he's still in the mix with the whole engine supplier thing? Alternatively, it could be incredibly tightly packaged that the Mercedes organization and / Toto have an investment in the team that they also supply the engines to, and it could be quite synergistic, as they say, in business. And you lose all that baggage. And so because this is where it's so sneaky, clever, let's say, because they know that they've got that leverage, they're like, well, why do we have to put up the 750 then? We can just lowball them and we've still got an advantage. So we can get the benefit for cheap with the weight and the heft that we have behind us. Which is kind of a brilliant move, If they were all in, we want it. This is what we want. We want a second team, so to speak. And, 750 million is obviously a lot of money, but for a massive organization like the Mercedes Group and, Toto, it's not like you'd be losing that money. It's not like it would be a bad investment, right? Going into another Formula One team that, at least this year so far in the era, mid-grid, even with them being woeful over the past few years, their valuation has shot up. So by the end of this season, that investment could be way higher, given the fact that their performance has increased, and they'll probably attract better sponsors or different sponsors, or more plentiful sponsors. And just the value and the marketing value of that team skyrockets as their performance increases. So 750 million may be a steal, let alone whatever they're offering, because it hasn't been announced what the Toto/Mercedes deal is. So all the shenanigans going on behind the scenes at Alpine are fascinating to me. Now, this is where I said some of the stories are connected. Let's go to an article on the race. This is by John Noble. Came out yesterday. Brown escalates Team Alliance crusade in letter to FIA. So McLaren CEO Zak Brown is not happy about all of this. I don't think he cares whether Christian Horner comes in and takes over a stake because he's not affiliated with any team. He left the whole Red Bull organization, absolutely not connected to them anymore. But I don't think he's happy about Mercedes buying into Alpine, and we've got like a Red Bull Racing Bull situation going on with the Mercedes. And so he wrote a letter to the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, urging him to tighten up the rules and effectively eliminating alliances between teams. Now, that would necessitate, of course, the Red Bull Racing Bull split, because you can't have one rule for one team and another rule for everyone else. And I mentioned this on the podcast a few days ago, and Mohammed Ben Sulayem was very mealy-mouthed about it. On the one hand, I like it. On the other hand, it's bad. But, maybe. Like, there wasn't a lot of definitive statements coming forth, right? So recently, Brown said at a factory speech of some kind, I guess, he said it applies to anybody and everybody. So A-B teams, co-ownership, regardless of who it is, I frown upon it. I don't think it's healthy for the sport, but it's not personal or towards any one team or individual. So that was at the McLaren factory, right? But he actually wrote this letter, supposedly a 6-page letter. So he goes into detail, and apparently the race has seen this letter and they paraphrase it here. He doesn't actually specifically, Brown that is, state that he's referring to the Mercedes and Alpine situation, but just the concept of team partnerships in general. So he wrote, this is a little quote here, "This is a real concern that the sport risks taking a step backwards in terms of integrity and fairness at a time when the regulatory framework has been designed with significant collective effort to move in the opposite direction." And then he went on to cite instances where the Racing Bulls team have put their thumb on the scale of the championship. So there was the time when Daniel Ricciardo took the fastest lap in 2024 in Singapore to get a point away from Lando Norris. And just recently in Miami, Liam Lawson just not making it subtle that he just got out the way of Verstappen to let him through, to just wave him through. He also said that, and actually I think this is a really interesting point, that shared facilities, which are, to be clear, restricted like wind tunnel time, they can essentially use both their allocations and share the results, which gives them a massive advantage. Who's to say Red Bull couldn't say to Racing Bulls, oh, just test out this little component in your car when you're in the wind tunnel and let us know how it goes, That's what he's referring to. There's also the argument that team personnel can just move back and forth without any restriction. Whereas when other teams move from team to team, or, for example, someone from the FIA Aero department recently announced they're moving to Alpine. But because they were working for the FIA, they had to take 6 months gardening leave. Now, none of that has to happen when you can just move from team to team, So again, a massive advantage. That I feel personally is like, well, okay, fine, If you're sharing all that information between the teams anyway, like what difference does it make? But the argument is that other teams have to play by those rules, so they should too. And honestly, that sort of reinforces the idea that you do want, for competition, 11 independent teams racing each other. That is just the best show possible. But if 2 of those teams and 4 of those cars are just not in contention with one another, they just move them strategically where they should be, that is massively taking away from the sport and degrading the integrity of Formula One. This is his argument. And of course, he's going to make this point because they don't have a second team and would be disadvantaged, and are also a customer team of Mercedes versus a customer team with full integration like Alpine. I think he can see the writing on the wall that this Alpine team could be a real threat to us, and to everyone. But obviously they care about themselves over everyone else for obvious reasons, and quite rightly. So anyway, check that out. There's lots more quotes from the letter and other points that he likes to make. So that is Brown escalates Team Alliance crusade in letter to FIA, and that's on The Race, and that's an article by John Noble. So that's really interesting. All right. That was an awful lot on that subject. Let's move it on to something else. So, let's go back to this old chestnut. This is on planetf1.com, an article by Jamie Woodhouse. Here's the headline. Mattia Binotto tells F1 critics, quote, "Don't be so negative," as F1 V8 return gathers momentum. Okay, so another team boss saying, calm down, everything's fine. Let's be clear, Mattia Binotto is the boss of the Audi F1 team. And if you remember, Audi were the ones really pushing for getting rid of the MGUH and the current 50-50 split. They wanted to come in to Formula One as equal as they could be by making everyone have to renew everything. If they came in to the sport, they had to develop the MGUH, understand how that works, build one, make it work, spend all the money, and then everyone else has had years and years and years to develop and figure out their power unit, and they're coming in cold. That's not going to be a good look for Audi, right? So it was in their interests for the whole Etch-a-Sketch to be shaken up at the start of this season. So you could say this is just an independent opinion, and of course Mattia Binotto is just a human being, got their opinion, but it is in Audi's interest to say, hey, all these changes that we kind of, helped to bring in, it's not so bad, guys. But yeah, I mean, that is a fair point. There have been some good parts to this season. It's not all bad. I'm not a doom and gloom person at all about 2026. So, this article kicks off actually with a quote by Fred Vasseur, who believes that the battery-influenced style of competition in F1 this year has removed the artificial feel of the DRS era. So, that's interesting, right? He believes that the DRS overtakes were far more artificial than the battery. And I'm assuming that is because, you get to the DRS zone, you open the DRS, if you're within a second, job done. Not much strategy involved in other than get as close as you can to the car in front to get into the DRS window. Whereas with the battery and stuff, it's much more strategic. When are you going to use it? When are you going to hold back? When are you going to charge versus deploy? There's a lot more strategy and a lot more brain and a lot more human in there. If you take out all of the artificiality in the car driving itself and the, whatever, it's not, there's problems, but it's not sort of as stupid overtakes, right? They're not dumb overtakes. Anyway, back to the article. So it goes on to detail the changes for the Miami race and the tweaks that they brought in, and then highlighting the fact that FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem stated that V8 engines are coming back with a target of 2030, but no later than 2031, and that Red Bull, Ford, GM would be open to that move. Also, Mercedes, as previously said in previous articles, Toto Wolff said he's not against it too, so, lots of potential for this to actually happen. However, This is the quote from Mattia Binotto, team boss of Audi F1. First, I should say, what are the comments of our drivers? Our drivers are enjoying the current format, and I think it has been a big change as to the past. Everyone needs to adapt to the changes. But overall, I think if you look and you watch the races, for the fans, it has been a great show as well. Overtaking since the very first race, close fights, which is not obvious when you've got such a big discrepancy in the regulations. So I think the format is a great format, and F1 remains a platform for innovation at the edge of technology. The fans know that behind there is a technical challenge. So what will be the future? I think it's too early to say. Certainly we have started discussing it with the FIA. We will, I think, sit down, discuss what's the best for F1. But I will not be so negative on the current format. Overall, I think it's a good format. We have slightly changed the regulation to fine-tune it, try to improve. Maybe we'll do more in the future in the next seasons, but I think we should also be somehow as well All right. But I think we should be also somehow as well positive on what we can see. And if you look in the past, I think there have been eras where Formula One was more boring. So overall, I don't think we should be so negative. Audi has always looked for high-efficiency engines, and I think that's important to us. And we certainly discuss with the FIA what's the best compromise for the future. I'll do a little bit more. Honestly, we had good races, a lot of overtaking. You can say that perhaps you have the feeling that it's a bit artificial, but for me, it's much less artificial than the DRS. DRS was just push to pass on the button. Today, it's energy management and it's coming from the drivers or from the team. It's not artificial at all. And then he goes on to say that they still might need to refine it a little bit, but they're all cool with it. So actually, yeah, Binotto said pretty much what I was saying that Vasseur probably thought, was that there was more strategy involved in battery overtakes than there was with DRS. That's the argument. So yeah, Binotto very punchy on how great Formula One is in 2026. Now, I'm not sure I'm fully on board with that, if I'm honest. And he has a vested interest as the F1 boss of Audi to say that. He may very well believe it, 100%. Not ruling that out at all. But they're not necessarily jumping on the V8 train just yet, at least as far as this suggests. I think if almost all the other teams are on board, I don't think they're going to necessarily stick their neck out and veto it. However, I don't know how much of a majority you have to make these fundamental engine changes. I don't know what the rules are with that. But yeah, they're clearly not going to be keen to just give it up without any kind of fight. So I thought that was interesting. Both Vasseur and Binotto in a similar place. And finally, on F1.com, this is an article called "This is a Long Game. Wolff on the importance of keeping the pressure off Antonelli." All right, now, this makes so much sense, right? Everyone, all the social media, all the podcasts are like, Antonelli's going to be champion. He's destroying Russell, blah, blah, blah. It is going to be such a turnaround when he does something wrong, which he will do. He's a teenager and he's a Formula One driver, and the weirdest things happen in Formula One. So it's inevitable. Sooner or later, something's going to go wrong and it's going to be his fault. That's just how it goes. And it's round 4 of however many rounds we're going to have this year. Don't think it's going to be 22, probably 21, maybe 20, we'll see. But it's still only 4 rounds so far. So, he's 20 points ahead, which is great. Not taking anything away from him. Superb driving. Incredible. Anyway, let's get to the article. So as we know, last year was a real up and down season for Antonelli. He had that real dip in form. I feel like around Spa, Mercedes gave him kind of a stern talking to. And then the second half of the season, he did really, really well. And he sort of carried that energy on to this year. And even with that good run at the end of last year, Wolff had previously said that he didn't really expect such a great run from Antonelli at the start of this year. I mean, who would? It sort of defies expectation. He's got 100 points. Where is he? So yeah, of course, George. So he's 20 points ahead. Kimi on 100, George on 80, Charles on 59, then it's Lando on 51, alongside Lewis also on 51. That's the top 5. And then Oscar a bit further back on 43, Max down in P7 on 26 points. So yeah, I mean, he's got almost 4 times the points of Max Verstappen after 4 rounds. That's crazy. Okay, back to the article. And this is a quote from Toto. I think all of us collectively that are close to him, we need to keep re-emphasizing and repeating the message, this is a long game. He has a killer of a teammate that is extremely fast. The others are catching up in performance and we want to play the long game. He can hopefully win many championships over 10 years, 15 years. We don't want to stumble now with these huge expectations that will sit on him because the moment he has a bad race, which will happen, where he makes a mistake, people will say Kimi is not the one superstar that we thought. Let's keep that trajectory. It's a share price that's going up. He's 19 years old. I don't think I was able to take my own flight when I was 19 and slide my way to the terminal of the airport, so it's incredible what he's doing. Okay, great points. I think, who would argue with that? Doing incredible at 19 years old. And honestly, if he's able to soak up the pressure, and even if he makes mistakes, but he bounces back from them, I mean, that will be extraordinarily impressive. And I think a lot of these teams are not just looking necessarily at current performance, but they're looking at growth. And if you look at growth over the course of 1 year, I mean, think back a year ago. I mean, think back 2 years ago. Where was he 2 years ago? And now he's leading the Formula One championship? Incredible. But, as is always the case, the fans, the teams, the press, everyone gets very, very excited and the pressure mounts and mounts and mounts. And of course, when pressure mounts, there just needs to be some kind of release valve. And usually that's a mistake, right? And then the whole thing doesn't release gently with a release valve, it explodes. And so while I absolutely want to give him his dues, I think contributing to the pressure is probably not ideal. And then I want to finish with this quote here. Wolff said, "When you think about what we said last year, it's exactly how his performance, how his development happened. We had these great ups and moments of brilliance and then moments where he was allowed to make mistakes. We needed to calibrate and continue to mentor him whilst having pressure on him. He's able to analyze it, but then don't overthink it. He compartmentalizes it. Okay, I made a mistake. I put it away." I love that because they kind of rushed him into the car because Lewis left, but they saw last year as an opportunity to sort of desensitize him, right? Put him in a car that could do well. He did excel, but then he made a lot of mistakes, or a few mistakes, not tons, an okay amount of mistakes for a rookie. But then, and I remember this happening, like I say, I think it was in Spa, they did put him under a little pressure in the press. I remember Toto saying something to the effect of, you got to pull your socks up, lad, and I'm sure he felt that. But that was a sort of acid test under the pressure, and it makes him much more competitive this year, knowing he's sort of hardened to that pressure. So brilliant strategic move by Toto, by the Mercedes team, by his management, everyone. I'm sure his family were involved as well. Of course they were. So if you want to see good people management, look at how they've dealt with Antonelli, this teenager who is now leading the championship in 2026. So anyway, those were the articles that I wanted to talk about today. We are exactly 1 week from P1 in Canada. I love Canada. I think the track is beautiful. I happen to love the city of Montreal. I've been there a bunch of times for voiceover work and mocap. And it's just a fantastic city. I love the track. More often than not, it's a great race. I talked about a couple of races yesterday with Robert Kubica, 2007 and 2008. Of course, 2012 was incredible. There's so many iconic moments. The Wall of Champions, Seb Vettel getting miffed at the penalty, which I actually flew over that when that was happening. I was flying into Montreal to do a mocap session, funnily enough, for a game that I'm in, Rainbow Six Siege. And I was flying over the track as the race was finishing. So, like, when you see that footage of him moving the podium little stands in front of the cars at the last minute, I was in a plane above that at that exact moment. So anyway, yes, so excited for Canada. Can't wait to see what happens with this Mercedes upgrade. This is going to be so interesting. Are Ferrari going to get their heads around their upgrades from Miami? Are they going to bring any more? There's a big upgrade coming for McLaren as well. I'm sure Red Bull are going to bring a bunch of stuff, or just to continue their improvement on what they figured out in Miami, because that was a huge step forward. And yeah, are Aston Martin going to come with better knowledge of their car? And are they going to make it competitive? And when they can make it competitive, they're going to fix that gearbox issue that they were talking about. How fast is that car? You know, now they're not shaking the fillings out of the drivers, and hopefully the downshifts are better. How fast is that car? I mean, who knows? So many stories. Anyway, I will be back again tomorrow. Have a great day, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye for now. I've been your host, Jamie Muffett. You can find me on social media for more of this rambling nonsense under my name or F1_Jamie. This is an RPS audio production.